You watched Starmer's resignation speech this morning.
I had on the radio.
Okay. Oh, well,
That's the difference between us, isn't it?
I don't have a radio. There was something interesting. So he did what all resigning politicians do, which is wax lyrical about their achievements, which we might just be used to because it's kind of what they do.
Yeah.
Realistically, I don't know why. I don't actually know why they do that. Is that to give reassurance to the next leader that the Labour Party's in good stead? Because other than just being a boasting thing, I don't know why. Every resignation letter, every resignation speech is, this is what I've achieved. And it's almost like an ego thing of reassuring themselves that they've actually achieved a great deal for the country.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway.
I mean, the only thing it said to me was that how disconnected he is from real life, because actually things have got so much worse over the past 2 years. Why does he think they've got better?
So it mirrors a lot of what we discuss about democratic deficit, about our political class being out of touch. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think he knows how bad things are. But the fact that his speech was just, it felt like it was from a different reality to the one we're living in.
Exactly.
I was with some friends last night and we were talking to somebody that's visiting the country, an Australian, and he was asking us about the political situation, and the group that I was in, very different politics, but we all agreed on the fact that the UK is in a really, really bad situation. It's almost the only thing we can agree on, within that political spectrum. People on the left, people on the right, people in the middle seem to all agree that we're in dire straits as a country. And then for the Prime Minister to come out and go through these things, it just felt delusional. I was watching it thinking, that sounds like a nice country, the one he's describing.
Yeah.
The economy's great and all of these problems are not an issue. Two things caught my eye because of what I wanted to discuss on the podcast today, which was small boat crossings falling, asylum hotels closing in his list of accomplishments. And I thought that's interesting because a lot of people on the left, quote unquote left, for them, they would say that's not an issue. The small boat crossings, the asylum hotels. And him recognising that is a recognition that for any Labour government to win, they know that they need to get a hold of those issues.
Yeah.
And Burnham, I think we've seen that, the way he discusses it and the way his language has changed in recent years. And you'll have noticed that because he was contesting a seat in Makerfield, which reform were the biggest challengers, his language was very much more accommodating to people that might want to vote reform.
Yeah. And my left-wing friends, we're all involved in lots of different discussions, aren't we? And one of my left-wing friends' discussions was around, I can't believe they're saying that Shabana Mahmood might keep her job. Which I was thinking, I think that's a good call.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That.
So Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, who from the outside, I think she is much closer to the median British voter about concern for immigration and such. And yet people on the left and Labour Party members who are going to elect the next leader, they are she's very unpopular with them.
Correct.
Which is fascinating.
It is.
Yeah. And she's in a difficult position, and we have some friends in Blue Labour.
Yeah.
Blue Labour is, I don't know how they describe themselves, but I would say a slightly more socially traditional version of Labour. Mahmood Glasman started it, but some influence within the Labour Party. And at the point we've kind of said to them is that Shabana Mahmood can do stuff that is broadly popular as a policy with the median voter, but the median voter doesn't recognise that because it's tainted with the Labour brand.
Yeah.
And we'll get into some of the stats on immigration, but I wanted to focus on illegal immigration and particularly the asylum hotel process.
Okay.
Because last week, when I was cycling back from church in the centre of town, I came along Wilmslow Road, and there's a hotel there where they are housing asylum seekers. And there's quite often a protest. And we've seen them around Greater Manchester. I know there's quite a big case in Altrincham, which is not too far from you.
Correct.
And I I found it a fascinating thing. So I think it's the first one I've ever witnessed or been to, spoken to people. And I had a bit of time, so I thought, go on then, I'll stop and chat. And the first side of the road that I spoke to were the people protesting the asylum hotel. And they're waving St. George's crosses and British flags. And that's because I was on that side of the road, right? So I sort of just said, oh, what's going on here? And there was a thing, and I think we talked about it briefly last week, but it came up, I think 3 times in 2 days, this notion that when talking to somebody about an issue, you should already be up to date with all the facts. I think this is a very 2026 thing,
Yeah.
right? That we assume that people should go online and get their information before conversing in public. And I'm completely opposed to that.
Agreed.
I think that when we remove the need for social interaction and from learning from other human beings, then we're going down a really bad path.
It also suggests you need to research it so you know which tribe you're in.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the issue. And a lot of we talk about with the breakdown of the political, which maybe we'll get onto. So the first thing I said is like, oh, what's going on here? And the guy's like, oh, come on, mate. You don't know what's going on here. I'm like, well, I can guess, but like, tell me about it. And he's like, oh, have you not done your research? I'm like, what? But then he kind of wandered off, and I got chatting to some others, and they were very friendly, mixed, but the ones I spoke to broadly very friendly, had some really interesting conversations with them, and kind of was interested to know I think this is always what I'm interested to know, where are their concerns that they might be a little bit uncomfortable with their position. And particularly I wanted to know because whilst I agree with some of their concerns about illegal immigration, I find the idea of protesting at an asylum hotel quite unsavoury. And perhaps I'm just too soft. But I'm aware of the fact that there will be quite vulnerable people amongst those asylum seekers, and to be met with this protest outside, that doesn't make me super comfortable. So I chatted to them for probably half an hour or so, and then thought I really need to go across to the other side of the road. And on the other side of the road, there was a much larger group of people, mostly in a line, sort of blocking the hotel. And they were all but one person out of the 30, 40 people had masks or
I hate that.
Yeah, balaclavas on.
Yeah.
Which I found really intimidating.
Yes.
They were flying mostly Palestinian and pride flags, with one guy right at the far end flying a St. George's cross with refugees welcome written in the middle. And I said this to both sides, and I sort of said the same things, interestingly, to both sides, and the same challenges, that the first side I spoke to was less intimidating because they didn't have their faces covered.
Yeah. They're
flying the flag that represents me,
yeah,
the Union Jack, that is the country I belong to. And the other side were a lot more intimidating, and they had signs, and they weren't being vocal. And I will say that the first side were much more abusive in the sort of shouting across at the people that were blocking the asylum hotel. And I spoke to them for a bit as well, and tried to the guy with his face uncovered was the only one that wanted to speak to me. And yeah, it was interesting, and I think it fits in with a lot of what we've been discussing recently, which is that it's mostly vibes.
Yes.
A lot of it's vibes, and I think if you get underneath that and start to break it down, you can see that there's good reasons why both camps are there. That's the contestation that I will make, because the second camp, the one that are blocking the asylum hotel, they are believing that they're standing up against racism, and I honestly think that I am opposed to racism. If I believed, and I genuinely think that they believe that they're standing up against racism, then they're doing the right thing. If that's what they believe, right?
But if they are doing what they believe, why do they have to cover their faces?
So I asked him about that, and he said, well, I'm black, so I'm already screwed. But he said the others, what happens is these people on the other side of the road, the ones with the Union Jacks, And by the way, the Union Jack, there's this thing about it can only be called a Union Jack at sea. Do you know about that?
Well, I think that's a bit. It's a bit pedantic. I think
It is, and now it's apparently now you can call British Union flags Union Jacks. So I'm starting to get on board with that trend.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just don't want the pedants watching to
go
after me in the comments. And so he said that the people waving the Union Jacks, they would film the protesters and put it on social media and dox them. Do you know this term, doxing?
Say who they are.
Say who they are and where they live.
But if they think they're standing up for the right thing, why should they care?
And he said that employers will take issue with it. And I said, don't you think that the other side would care more about that?
Yeah.
And when he sort of shrugged.
I think that's nonsense.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. And I do think that I do think if you're going to protest, you have to have your face uncovered.
I agree.
Because it's like, well, if you're brave enough to go out and protest, and it is scary,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Then you should have your face uncovered. You should be brave enough to do that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go through a couple of the claims that they were making and just try and give a bit of a broad summary of where we're at now, because I think it's this sort of thing that, I mean, we haven't checked in on illegal immigration in a good while.
We've not, no.
And so it's worth doing. So small boat crossings falling. I'll show you a graph and I'll pop it up on the video. Small boat crossings. So this is a graph showing the cumulative number of crossings for the year prior to each recorded date. And you can see that there's this big spike around 2022, which was the post-COVID wave, where after COVID there was a lot of boat crossings across the channel. And then it dipped slightly, but it's gone back up. And I think Starmer is talking about this little fall here.
So where does that...
that is the peak, was at sort of the tail end of 2025.
Okay.
And the year prior, for the first 6 months of the year, is showing a slight decrease.
Okay.
But there's nothing to say that that's going to carry on decreasing. You can see the graph going up and down. So, I mean, that is tenuous as a claim.
I agree.
And we're talking about, 45,000 people crossing the channel illegally every year. Small boat crossings make up about 88% of illegal entries into the UK. So there will be a lot of people that are here illegally, but they will have come in legally and overstayed visas. But in terms of illegal entries, I think small boat crossings are vast majority.
Oh, are they? I thought it was the other way around, that the vast majority, that people's focus is on the crossings. But actually, it was more people who overstay visas.
Yes, but that's a legal entry.
Ah, so right. Okay.
In terms of illegally entering the country, the vast majority is small boat crossings. There are some that come across in vans.
Yeah. Understood.
And some at airports when they get into the country, but they've not got the right visa on arrival.
Okay.
The vast majority then, well, I was going to say the vast majority, all then apply for asylum.
Yeah.
It's supposedly it's about 99%. I'm wondering who the 1% is that says, "Oh no, it's wrong. I'll head back."
I think it's. I think when I last looked at this, it was something like 85% are successful at the first attempt, and then that goes up into the higher than 95 after the appeals.
Interesting, that's not true anymore.
Oh, is it not? Right. Okay.
Yeah, so that was true. Around 2022, that peaked.
Okay.
And it was about 80%.
Right, okay.
That were, like you say, successful at the first attempt. Now it's interesting, about 42%.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's decreased massively. And that's partly the reforms that Shabana Mahmood has made since being Home Secretary. This is obviously, and I think we just need to contextualise the why this is an issue, because a lot of the immigration debate gets conflated and confused. And whilst I think that illegal immigration and legal immigration are very much linked and they very much impact each other for various different reasons, I think it's worthwhile separating the issues.
Absolutely.
So that we can discuss them in the proper way.
Yeah.
The protests, and this is where I think a lot of people get this wrong, that particularly when we're operating in the political realm and we're on political Twitter and we see things. I think the people that are protesting, their real laser concern is on illegal immigration. And interestingly, the people I spoke to at this protest, quite a few of them weren't concerned about legal immigration. Now, that's anecdotal, and I'm not saying that's true for everybody. And I think we've spoken about this as real concerns with legal immigration, but just focusing on illegal immigration because it is the issue that kind of gets to the heart of the problem. It's the one that is visible. It's the one that has like an emotive level connected to it. We see the news articles every day. So it's the one that kind of, it identifies it sort of symbolizes the breakdown of the state. Because
Agreed.
The sort of fundamental level of what a state is, it's an area with borders, with boundaries. And if you can't control those boundaries and you're allowing people to come in and not enforcing them, that really rubs people up the wrong way. And so a big factor affecting how Burnham, if he does become Prime Minister, gets on, it will be illegal immigration as an issue.
Yeah. So are we saying, in terms of Mark and Keir's homework, that he claims to have reduced illegal immigration? We think that's a bit of a tall tale.
One of the policy ideas for deterring illegal entries into the country, was to have this one in, one out scheme. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
It was implemented with the French. So the idea being that anybody that crossed the border from France, we would send them back to France, and we would take another person that had not attempted to enter the country illegally. So we're not, by sending them back, we're not further affecting France because we're taking somebody in their place.
Yeah.
But supposedly it's to deter people from crossing. I think there's a lot of issues with it. Total number is still fewer than 1,000 people have been returned via that. And you can see when we're up to 45,000 a year, I mean, it's a drop in the ocean. And there are real problems with that scheme. I think that it fundamentally it doesn't work. And it kind of doesn't work in a similar way that the Rwanda policy didn't work, right? Is that from the outset, you can see the issues with it. My argument with Rwanda was always that you are not in control of that territory, so you don't get to say what happens to the people that you are sending there.
Yeah.
And that'll always be the breakdown. And you can have this, this agreement, but then we get back into sort of international treaties and, the sort of politics we've kind of left. And I mean, the UK, we've spoken about this before. I mean, SDP policy would be to create a detention centre on an overseas territory like Ascension Island, which the UK, we have that benefit of having these islands dotted around, and it would be doable.
Yes.
To do that. And by just saying and making it clear that anybody that crosses the border illegally is going to go to that detention centre, is not going to, be able to stay in the UK, you send that message, and it does create the deterrent. But the important thing with the deterrent is you have to be able to, you can't allow them to call your bluff.
Exactly.
Because if you say, the detention centre is only, it will only hold 500 people, then they know that, okay, that you can't.
You're not serious.
Yeah, you're not serious.
Yeah.
So you just have to be serious about the issue, I think. And a lot of the claims from the asylum hotel protesters, a lot of people that are concerned about this issue, revolve around crime.
Yeah.
The problem is the police don't record immigration status when arresting people.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought, well, why not? Couldn't they do that? And it does seem like it's not as simple as you might think, because that is a Home Office, that's Home Office information, and there would be that difficulty of kind of contacting the immigration authorities every time they arrested somebody to find out. And it's changing as well all the time, someone's immigration status. So I don't know, that's perhaps, perhaps there's a way of doing that, but I'm not sure if it's doable.
I think there's a real problem. Certainly, I know from the Altrincham Hotel protesters that there was an expectation among some of them that people were kind of being held in the hotel, and they kept wanting the police to make sure that they stayed in the hotel. And the police said, "Well, no, they're allowed to come out." And I think it's that kind of fundamental misunderstanding of what these asylum hotels are for
Yeah.
that is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Certainly the one in Altrincham is kind of between two girls' schools, and it's largely single men. And I think that's what made the community very nervous about it.
So I wanted to do like a myth busting. I was going to lay out some myths, but we've already covered a few of them. So I'll bring them in when it's suitable. But you mentioned that a lot of it is single young men. There is a fundamental problem that both sides have alternate facts. And you could say that statement about anything, literally anything within the realm of politics at the moment. And this is the breakdown of the political, because when we fail to start to understand why people are on the other side of an issue, we start to strawman their arguments. We become more and more siloed within a group of people that understand us.
That's right. Yeah.
And you don't actually, you have this gulf, this chasm between you. And I mean, that was poetically displayed at this hotel protest the other day, because there was a literal road in between, and someone crossed the road at one point and the police were like, get back on your side of the road. And I thought they can't talk to each other.
Yeah.
They literally can't talk to each other. It was interesting. One of the claims from the sort of more pro-migration side is that, these are poor women and children crossing. And the other side will say, no, it's a single young men. It's predominantly men, predominantly adult men. So
and I think they do tend to use different hotels. So some hotels they will use for families.
Exactly.
And some hotels they will use for single men.
Exactly. So 71% of people crossing the channel in the year, I think up to 2025 was 71% were adult men.
Mm-hmm.
And about the children accounted for about 12 to 18%, and the rest were adult women. 60% originate from only 5 countries. So Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iran, Sudan, and Somalia, which is interesting. And before, I think that was Albania, until they had that agreement, which saw their small boat crossing numbers decrease massively. So going back to crime, it's difficult to know how much crime is committed by asylum seekers. Now, the people at the protest were claiming that, I would say they were exaggerating the amount of crime committed. Now, I don't know because I don't have the numbers, but I'd be willing to go out on a limb and upset a lot of people by saying that most asylum seekers do not commit crime. And you might think that sounds, how could he possibly say that? I'd say that by thinking it through rationally, it would seem crazy for it to be anywhere near the majority are committing crime. Partly because if you're an asylum seeker, you're trying to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
You're trying to get into the country because it is so economically beneficial. That's why so many people are crossing the channel. You have access to a welfare system, which is, it's
pretty good.
Much better than
Eritrea.
where you've come from. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm losing my strand here. Sorry, what was I saying?
You were talking about myth busting, and you're saying that people don't. How many people are single young men, and do they all commit crime?
Yeah, so most don't commit crime is what I would say, and I don't have hard evidence to back that up. I think that would make sense.
I think one of the things is there is no hard evidence. So
exactly,
there's a lot of discussion about you can use an evidence base to say which people are more likely to commit crime, but it's really difficult to actually do that. And there is no evidence base for that really. So partly because the police don't record people's status in crime statistics, but also partly because you don't know how many people are here in total. So there is a real issue with our population measurement, and partly because we don't, we intercept a number of illegal people coming into the country, but certain numbers we don't intercept. So when it's one of those actuarial things that I find people find it hard to grasp. If you say this many people committed a crime from this country, that doesn't tell you about how likely they are to commit a crime because you don't know the denominator of that fraction. and getting hold of that denominator is actually really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So there is not really an evidence base that you can use to measure and compare crime statistics in the UK across people from different countries.
Here's the counter to that.
Okay.
You don't need a denominator, is my argument, because if the numerator is bigger than 1, in terms of the number of people that are committing crime, then you've got a problem. These are people that are entering illegally, and I imagine you'd agree with this. There's an argument I've had with people that are suggesting, why are people focused on the levels of sexual assaults from asylum seekers compared to when the majority is going to be from white men. There's an argument on the progressive left, and I say because these are people that shouldn't be in our country anyway. So
Yeah.
any number is a number that didn't need to happen.
Agreed.
And there's been a lot of high-profile cases that have stoked tensions in regards to this.
But that's not the same. Your argument, which is that even if there's only 1, it's 1 too many.
Yes.
That's not the same argument as saying you can prove that these people are more likely to commit crime
Exactly.
than UK nationals,
Exactly.
which I don't think you necessarily can.
One thing they do record then is nationality when it comes to incarcerations. And interestingly, so in the year, in the 2024 calendar year, 13% of cautions and convictions were given to non-citizens, and 12% of people aged 16 or over were non-citizens that year. So it seems like it tracks more or less the same number.
Yeah.
We have 10,000 foreign national offenders in our prisons, which is about 12%, something like that, I think. I'm trying to remember the numbers, yeah. So that's one thing we can measure, but we don't.
Yeah.
What we don't know is are those the immigration status of the people that are committing crimes, and that's an issue.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the thing is that the people, if you look at crime statistics for the UK population, you will get a number across the population, but that will include young men, young women, old women, children, pensioners, everybody. Now, if you compare that with crime statistics for a particular country of country's immigrants who are largely young men, you're not comparing like with like there. What you'd need to compare it with is the crime statistics for UK young men. And, because you're not doing the same comparison there, I think that's often quite misleading. So I'm really nervous around all these stats that people throw around. When you say, people have these different stats, I do think there's a lot of people who are choosing stats that don't necessarily add up. I think there was a Reform councillor came up with some number that was just absolutely, utterly made up. And nobody could find out where the number came from.
And I think that's because people are approaching this, and I noticed this within my own life. I think it can happen with us. Like, we're not immune to this, where you sort of decided which side of the argument you're on, and then you're searching for anything which backs that up.
Exactly. And nothing that doesn't.
Yeah.
Nothing that challenges it.
You see that with these hotel protests.
Yeah.
And I can understand the anger. I can understand the anger from both sides.
Yeah.
I really can. And when you speak to them, you can see they are genuine.
Yeah.
People are searching for their own facts.
Yes.
So I would say with something like this, you go back to the basics of, we have a problem where 45,000 people roughly are entering illegally. And I say illegally because that is what the UK government have deemed illegal. That's not subjective. And is that something we want? If it's not something we want, we have to kind of find a way of stopping it. And especially when you consider that some of these people that are crossing end up dying when they cross the channel. So this is not something we should want to continue, and any government should do everything they can to stop it, because it's such an important issue for the UK voters.
Agreed. So are you carrying on Keir's homework, or are you?
The second thing, he's right about the second thing in terms of asylum hotels closing.
Okay.
And it does seem, that trend seems to be one that is continuing. Not that you can tell what's going to happen in the future, but it was up at 400 and now it's around 160 asylum hotels in the country.
Okay. And where are those people going instead?
Well, that's the problem, HMOs. has multiple occupancy. So it's not necessarily an improvement.
Yeah. So I suppose all that leads back to the point you made at the beginning, which is that there seems to be a real gulf between what Keir Starmer seems to think he's achieved in 2 years and how the country is experiencing the last 2 years, which those two things don't seem to marry up too much.
Yeah, that's true.
Good
luck, Andy.
Good luck, Andy. Yeah.
I mean, I have my concerns, and I think he will quite quickly. A lot of people that like Andy Burnham, and there are a lot of people near where we live that like him. Because he was a popular mayor of Greater Manchester. But I think those people will go on a journey of falling out of love with him quite quickly, because he will be leading a dysfunctional Westminster government.
I suspect so.
And I hope that's not the case. I want him to succeed, because I want any prime minister to succeed.